All right. Thank you so much for joining us today for our January office hours, the first one of 2025. And today I'm so excited to kick things off with Alex. And Alex is our guest expert who will be helping us chat about workplace communication for neurodivergent professionals. And that's something that obviously all of you are interested in because you decided to hit sign up and join us here today. Or if you're watching the recording, you're interested because you want to learn more about how to improve your workplace communication or deal with the miscommunications and mishaps that happen just from a nature of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, in a neurotypical society. So I'm so excited to answer some of the pre-submitted questions today. And if you have any questions of your own today, you can also feel free to pop them in the chat. And if we have time, we'll try and answer those as well. In the meantime, just to get started here, I wanted to introduce myself for anybody who doesn't know me. My name is Veronica Yao, and I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers. And I work exclusively with neurodivergent professionals who are trying to build more sustainable work lives and break that cycle of burnout in the workplace. I do run my business under the name Atypical Careers, and you can see my social handles and my website there. So feel free to check that out, and I will be dropping the links in the call at the in the chat at the end of the call as well. I'm so excited to be hosting this alongside Alex, and Alex is a neurodiversity-affirming speech language pathologist and communication coach, as well as owner at Neurodiverse City Connection. Alex, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and where your expertise lies? Like, what do we need to know about you?
I love that. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be chatting with all of you. So yeah, as Veronica mentioned, I am a speech language pathologist. That's what I went to undergrad and graduate school for. And I had a chance to do some coaching at our Disability Services Center at the University of Illinois. And I realized that I really liked working with adults, and a lot of my clients were neurodivergent adults. And so I went into the field of speech pathology, started working primarily in pediatrics, which I loved, but I missed working with the adults and really getting to have meaningful conversations and kind of learning and helping. And I love in coaching that we get to kind of work together as a team. Like, I'm on your team, I'm pushing you to do better, but you're also there actively participating and trying to, make progress on the things that you've chosen to be working on, which a lot of my speech clients are not necessarily willing participants. Not that they don't want to be there, but it's oftentimes their parents or somebody else who signs them up. So I have been a coach for about 5 to 6 years now, and I recently decided that I wanted to specifically focus on doing communication coaching with the neurodiverse population, because I don't think that there are enough supports out there for neurodiverse adults. So I started up my own thing, and it's very recent. I'm very excited, and yeah, excited to be here.
That's amazing. And I think we can all agree that there is a huge shortage of supports for neurodivergent adults. That was something similar that I identified when I started my career coaching business for neurodivergent professionals. There's a lot of supports out there for children, but what happens when we become older and we, have to navigate places like the workplace, and we have to try and and our livelihood literally depends on us being able to navigate these situations and these environments. So I hope that we're going to have a chance to get into some of these really great questions today. We have a couple that have been pre-submitted. And, in addition, if there are any of you live in this call right now that want to share your own question, feel free to pop it into the chat. And again, I will try and make sure we have a chance to answer it as long as we have time there. So, Alex, how do you feel about getting started with the first question?
I feel great about it. Let's go for it. I also don't know if I
Sure.
said this out loud to everyone, but I'm self-diagnosed ADHD. Professionally diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, but I'm sure that you guys will be able to read some of that as I'm rambling and talking. So I appreciate all of you being welcoming of that, because I'm sure you will be.
No worries. And here, this is a very, I thought this would be a really great question to start off with. And I think a lot of us will resonate. The question is, why am I constantly misunderstood at work? And is this something that all neurodivergent people deal with? So I have some thoughts, but Alex, maybe you want to take the first shot at this. What do you think about this?
Yeah. So if I'm looking not directly at the screen, it's because I'm using my phone because I gave myself some notes that I wanted to make sure I cover. But I wanted to first answer the second question and say that I don't think all neurodivergent people necessarily deal with this, because I think some neurodivergent folks are lucky in the careers that they have found, and their careers kind of play upon their strengths, which is my goal for all of my clients, and I'm sure yours as well, Veronica, is to help neurodiverse adults find their place where they are welcome, celebrated, and get to do what they're good at. But I think that part of autism and sometimes ADHD as well is having a little bit of a different communication style. For example, most autistic adults that I've worked with tend to be very direct, and they often miss social cues. And so obviously when you're at work and there's a lot of people around you doing different jobs and you have different responsibilities, there is a lot of back and forth communication happening all the time. And so if two people have kind of different communication styles, it becomes very hard to be on the same page and to feel understood, heard, and validated if somebody's communication style is very different from yours. And I was going to say with ADHD, a problem that I've faced, and I think a lot of other ADHDers have faced, is attention and hyperfocus. And, you know, we thrive usually when we get to be creative and we get to do something we're interested in. But when we're given a task that's mandatory that we're not necessarily interested in doing, it becomes really hard to get those things done. And people tend to say words like lazy, confused, not very smart or stupid. And so, yeah, that's kind of my take. I can keep rambling, but I'll let you jump in now, Veronica.
No, like that was really great. And I think to expand on that, you know, there are a ton of reasons why people would, neurodivergent folks get misunderstood at work, because there's so much diversity under the neurodivergent umbrella as well. There's so many different challenges that we run into, but the ones that you mentioned are some of the most common ones among my clients as well. What are some of the other, you know, things that cause misunderstandings or miscommunications at work, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that comes in mind with me, and clients have mentioned this frequently, and it's not just at work, but I know we're talking primarily about work, is sensory preferences, sensory regulation. I think that with neurodivergent folks, there's usually a component in their function that is sensory based, whereas with neurotypical people, I feel like that's not necessarily a consideration. For lack of better words, I feel like their sensory system functions, you know, whereas neurodivergent individuals don't necessarily have a fully functional sensory system, meaning that it can underreact or overreact to different stimuli. And that can be a huge challenge when you're trying to remain regulated and focus on your work, and instead you can only pay attention to the fan that's spinning above your head or something along those lines. I'm sure there are millions of experiences that neurodivergent adults can offer here in things that they've struggled with. And then I think also expectations and like literal versus non-literal language. I know that many of my clients have had some miscommunication and difficulty there, where they say one thing and they intended for it to be taken in the way that they imagined it in their head, but somebody else doesn't take it that way. And then again, there's this like misunderstanding and somebody tends to be upset or angry or confused. And unfortunately for neurodivergent folks, there's not always somebody to go to be like, hey, so this happened at work and I have no idea what it means. And so those are the instances in which my clients seek out my support and where I think I help them.
Oh, that's a really great list there. And, you know, I think it really goes to show that it's not really about being misunderstood because of something you said. Like if you said something wrong, there is no right or wrong in communication. Communication is simply a tool that helps us, interact with other people and, achieve goals together and things like that. But if the people who you're working with inherently are not open to the idea that there is more than one way, more than one correct way of doing things, or there might be more than one way to interpret something, then that's really where the miscommunication happens. So yes, it's not, I'm going to say that, for us neurodivergent people, it's not necessarily our fault that the way that we communicate doesn't align with the people around us. However, in order to survive, we do need to, we can't always depend on society to kind of, adjust themselves for us. We need to take the initiative in order to survive our workplaces, to try and find these coping mechanisms, to find different skills and everything like that, so that you can minimize the number of miscommunications at work. And hopefully, if you're with a good employer, they'll meet you in the middle as well. So that's just what I think there. Anything else you'd like to say about this one?
I just wanted to say that I love that you said meet you in the middle, because I was going to say compromise. And I think that's something that all adults need to be able to do to be successful and functional around other people, because neurotypical or neurodivergent people are going to have different thoughts. They're going to have different feelings, opinions, and all of that. And so in order for people to be successful and good communication partners, is recognizing that others are not always going to get it, and they're not always going to be willing to understand or take time and all of that. And so I like what you said. Sometimes it's just about surviving, which sucks, which really sucks. So I'm sorry to any of you that have been in that position. I know I have, and I'm assuming that many of you have felt that way, where you're like, I'm not thriving. I'm just surviving. I'm doing the bare minimum here to really try to not, lose my livelihood. So agree with everything that you said, Veronica. And I think this kind of brings me, but I'll save this, but I was going to mention the whole masking and code switching thing that I know you and I have previously kind of discussed, but I think it'll be in a further question. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Absolutely. Let's move on to question number 2. And for anybody who's just joining us right now, just a note that you can actually post any of your questions that you haven't submitted yet into the chat, and we will do our best to try and get through those questions as well if we have time. But why don't we go on to the next question? Let's read it out here. I struggle with tone when blindsided. What can I do to improve my response to negative surprise? Improv classes? Why don't you take this one first, Alex? What do you think?
Yeah, and I love Sarah's comment there, Sarah. I feel the second question in my soul. I don't know what everyone identifies as, and that's obviously important, but I saw a meme yesterday, actually, and if it's okay, I'd love to just mention what it was about, because I think it's a nice lead into how I sometimes feel and how I feel like others in this group probably feel. Is that okay, Veronica?
Yeah, go for it.
If I find this really quick, it should take me just a quick moment.
For sure. While you're doing that, I can definitely comment on this, because, absolutely, like, when we are having to try and control our tone and control like the inflections in our voice and everything like that, when it doesn't come naturally, it can be very difficult and very jarring for the person who is on the other side if you respond in, a more monotone way. And I'm not saying that that's a good or bad thing. That's just a thing. It's morally neutral, but it can cause, complications. And, what you're really trying to do here in this case, I assume this person asking the question is trying to avoid complications and trying to avoid unnecessary conflict. So that's really kind of the heart of it. Improv classes, I'm a huge proponent of the performing arts. I used to go to an arts high school. It was basically like Glee, except real life. And it was fantastic. And honestly, I credit a lot of my experience in the performing arts to my ability to think on my feet. And even I used to say when I was younger that when I'm talking to other people, it almost feels like I'm in a play, and it almost feels like I'm making up the script on the spot and everything like that. Now, now that I'm in my 30s and I know that that was me being neurodivergent and my brain, trying to compensate for all of the challenges, for all of the social blocks and the things that I didn't quite understand, it makes a whole lot of sense there. I'll turn it over to you, Alex. Did you find what you were looking for?
Yes, I did. So I sent it, actually, I have a group of therapists, a couple OTs and a couple speech therapists that I work with. And I sent it and I was like, this is the most relatable thing I've seen in a long time. And they all commented back and they're like, this is so us. So it was just a video of a guy looking confused. And he was like, me wondering if I'm contributing to a conversation by using my own authentic experiences, or if I'm just being self-centered and rude or totally delusional. And I felt that, and it related to this because I feel like when I reflect back, I'm like, was I being clear? Was I being helpful? Like questioning the way that I'm communicating and if I'm getting across my message. And I liked what you said about how like there is no necessarily good or bad. I mean, there's obvious bad, right? Like screaming at somebody who didn't deserve it or something is obviously bad. But morally, it's like we all communicate differently and there's variations, and that's totally normal. So I think struggling with tone when blindsided, again, to me sounds very normal. And I think to many people sounds normal. I also think that the alternative to not varying your tone is just going quiet, which I know a lot of the clients that I've coached before have had that experience, or my speech clients as well, where they're like, I feel anxious and I feel like my input isn't, wanted here, or whatever I say is not going to be the reaction people are looking for. So I'm just going to shut down. And that's really sad too, because then they just can't actually, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. I should close it. Veronica asked me, she's like, is this going to be a distraction? I'm like, I think I should be okay. But anyway, the next thing that I wanted to say was I wrote down, I think anticipating a wide variety of tones and surprises at work can help neurodivergent individuals prepare for scenarios that can happen. So I guess my piece of advice in this question, or what was asked, was that like, be prepared for things to not go as expected. And I know that's incredibly hard. I struggle with that, and I'm sure a lot of you struggle with that. But I think at least if you have the idea in your mind that like, I'm going to be talking to somebody and they might say something that's going to be so aggravating, what am I going to do about it? And then I circle back to sensory regulation, which for me is huge. And like, everything that I've learned in school and just through working in the practice that I have been working, is that when you don't know how to self-regulate, it is incredibly difficult to control your tone or your facial expression, or, something else small that your body or your mind just kind of does without you having control over it. And so I think learning sensory regulation strategies rather than necessarily improv classes, which I agree with you, improv could be really fun and could be really helpful and could definitely teach skills that individuals could benefit from. But for me, my main point here was to suggest looking into some sensory regulation supports and kind of figuring out how to help yourself return to baseline before you have any type of outward reaction to the best of your ability. You're never going to have 100% control over this probably, and that's okay. But you can get better at reacting to something that you were not expecting, or that was negative and was upsetting or anything like that. So yeah.
Absolutely. That's really great information there. And we do have one question in the comments here, so I think we're just going to pivot over to that and give that a shot here.
Oh.
This question says, I feel that I always need to understand all the little details of tasks before doing them well. How do I make myself sound less annoying or passive aggressive when asking for clarifications? Luckily, I communicate mostly by email. What do you think about that, Alex? What do you take?
I think that's a really good question. And I also think a lot of people can probably relate to their tone, not when verbally speaking, because there is a tone in written communication too, right? And I struggle with that sometimes, and I love ChatGPT for that, which I don't know if that's great, but a lot of my clients use it. And I'm like, you know what? If it's helping you and making you feel more confident, then that's what it's there for. I mean, people use it for different reasons, but so that is one of my suggestions is, Marina, if you type in like a email response or something like that, and you're feeling that your tone is annoying or passive aggressive, one suggestion would be to copy paste it into ChatGPT and to say, I'm writing this email to my boss and I want my tone to be confident and persuasive and, whatever it is that you're trying to have come across in your message. And then ChatGPT hopefully should be able to give you a nice alternative. Yeah, you'll try. That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Absolutely. And I just dropped another link in the chat here called Goblin Tools, which actually does something similar. It actually, if you placed your text into there, it will actually use AI to judge what the tone of what you are giving off is. And they have a whole bunch of different, helpful tools in there, like, generating a task list and things like that. But absolutely, just to build off of what Alex said, it really, the tone and how we are interpreted by the recipient of our message really also has a lot to do with what your relationship is with them as well. So for example, if you don't have as strong of a rapport with them, then you probably want to err on the more formal side of things just in case. But if you are more familiar with them, you can be a little bit more familiar with them as well, and have a little bit more of a casual tone as well. It really is like the answer for most of these questions is it depends, and it really does come down to your ability to assess your situation and kind of pick the right course of action. And I'm glad you're finding it interesting. Goblin Tools is absolutely amazing. It has a whole bunch of different tools that I highly recommend for neurodivergent people, so you guys definitely check it out. In the meantime, let's move on to the next question here. I struggle to find the balance that my managers want between me taking initiative versus me operating outside my role. This includes just researching whether something is feasible without pulling the trigger on doing it. How do I know where the balance point should be? And this is tricky, right? Because what we're doing is what we're trying to do is manage other people's perceptions. And it's hard enough dealing with your own stuff. Now you have to try and, deal with other people's perceptions as well. And that can be a huge block for neurodivergent people. Alex, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, so this comes up a lot in conversation, or this type of message and question I get frequently from my clients, because it's hard enough, like you said, to understand how you're being perceived. So then in addition to that, to be able to perceive your communication partners, communication and wants, desires, reactions, and all of that, and to then be able to respond yourself in the way that you want to be portrayed is just such a cognitive load that totally makes sense why it's difficult for people. I think I have multiple thoughts to answer this question. I think, first of all, understanding that most professionals or most workers are going to have this feeling. So I don't think that this is you shouldn't feel alone, I guess, is my first thing to say. And I don't know if that's helpful, but to me, it helps to understand that I'm going through a problem or I'm facing a challenge that others are facing as well. And I think that many people struggle to find a balance between proving themselves, and doing a great job at work, and then just doing what they need to do because nobody necessarily asked them. A huge block for sure, especially on days when I feel very uncomfortable being perceived at all. Yeah, and that's true. Sometimes you just want to, I'm sure, retreat to a little corner, not have to put in the effort to read people all day and then mask maybe in response to that, because it's exhausting. And then I keep saying this and I feel like a broken record, but the regulation component is so huge for neurodivergent folks, because when they're not regulated, pardon my language, everything turns to SHIT. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but seriously, that's how I feel. And that's how I've understood how to work with my clients. And something helpful that I do to check is we do a little checklist at the beginning of our sessions. And so for all of you listening there, maybe that's something helpful to kind of implement in your day or before a certain task or something like that, is to kind of have a little regulatory checklist to see where you're at, and then maybe to have some strategies to address those things. But I think this balance is kind of like imposter syndrome, maybe. It's you got hired to do your job, probably for a great reason. And it doesn't mean that you're perfect at it and that you're going to know exactly Sugar honey iced tea is another way I've said it. I love that. But yeah, I think that you need to remind yourself why you got hired for this position and what your strengths are, and then to broach the subject gently if you want to push boundaries, is what I tell people that I work with. Like, you don't want to jump out and be like, well, I'm going to do this really big different thing that nobody asked me to do, and see, and hopefully everyone has a great reaction, and then you're disappointed if they don't. But maybe if you've been kind of achieving expectations but not exceeding them, and you're ready to, try something out, you try a little bit of something. Or if you have coworkers and you feel like you can trust one of them or some of them, maybe ask, be like, hey, so I've been working on this thing, and I kind of wanted to try this to help people out. Do you think that would be helpful? Does that sound like a good idea? And hopefully you'll get some good feedback.
Yeah, some really great points in there. Interestingly, I actually interpreted the question slightly differently, so I'm going to give you my take as well. The way I interpreted this question that was submitted is that, you're constantly being told by your managers to take initiative. However, you're also getting reprimanded by, for operating outside of your role. And that absolutely can happen in that case. And I have seen similar situations. And what it really kind of boils down to is, are you and your manager on the same page as to, what the expectations are? Oftentimes they will say, we want you to take initiative, but we don't want you to operate outside your role. What that translates to me in plain language is, we want you to put more effort into the work that you're doing, and not like, and make my life easier as a manager, and make the people you're working with, making their lives easier as well. And obviously that should go for all of the employees, basically. But we also don't want you to go so far out that we feel as management that we're losing control of the situation. And so really taking it from the manager's point of view, if I were a manager, I would probably be like, I want this person to take initiative in the sense that, I don't want them to be afraid of, pursuing new ideas. But that being said, I don't want to lose control because I am the manager. So the way to kind of like even this out is to make sure that you and your manager are on the same page, and about what the definition of taking initiative is. And keeping in mind that you probably want to communicate in a way where the manager still feels like they have a say and they have control, as opposed to you kind of like making an executive decision without letting them know, or letting them know after the fact, because then they're thrown for a loop, and then they're probably feeling very insecure about the fact that you went off and did something without their knowledge or something like that, regardless of whether or not it was good or bad. That is a little bit of the dynamics that I have seen in workplaces before, and it can be quite challenging. And it, again, really comes down to the relationship you have with the individual. But hopefully that angle is helpful. Is there anything you would add to that, Alex?
Well, I was just going to say that that's a really helpful angle for me, because, and I will say, I think you definitely have significantly more experience working in career coaching, like specifically, I feel like I know a whole lot about autism and ADHD and like regulation and communication and all of that. But when it comes down to like dynamics within the workplace, I think I've had some experience, but I really like that you shared that take, and I'm reflecting on it and I'm learning from you. And it gives me some thoughts for a specific client that I'm working with that I feel like definitely struggles with this, I don't know if I want to say problem, but this type of situation where she doesn't know kind of, where she's at work and what's too much and what's not enough. And she's working on people pleasing. And I'm like, I think some clear communication and asking and understanding what her relationship with her manager and bosses would be very, very helpful to figure out how to move forward. So thank you for your take on it. It's making me think.
Absolutely. And we're all learning from this. That's why I love having guest experts on here, because, the different perspectives are so valuable. Now, let's move on to the next question here. We still got a good half hour left. This question says, how do I learn to speak neurotypical and present more normal at work? And honestly, when I read this question,
Mhm.
it kind of broke my heart a little bit
Yes. Yep.
that you felt the need to have to pretend to fit into something when the person that you are is probably enough. And if you were hired for the job, as Alex said for a previous question, you are probably fully qualified for the job and everything like that. But, I understand how these kinds of miscommunications and communication challenges can make you feel like an imposter. It can make you feel lesser than and everything. So that's just kind of the context I wanted to bring into this. And, I wonder, Alex, what do you make of this? And like, what do you think the balance is in terms of trying to be your authentic self versus blending in with the crowd, so to speak?
Yeah, I love how you keep saying like buzzer words that are at the tip of my tongue because you just said the word balance, and that's exactly what I was going to say. So I wrote up a little response to this because I had a pretty big reaction too when I read this. I was like, oh, like I don't even want to answer that question because I don't want this person to seek this kind of information. I want them to like seek empowerment and like to figure out how to be their authentic selves and like themselves so others can like those portions of them. And that doesn't mean that you don't have to work on yourself, right? That doesn't mean you don't have to modify some things about yourself. I think everyone has to do that. But specifically to kind of focus on changing your brain or faking or being different, it was just sad. So here's what I wrote. I said, you seek balance in order to be successful. The world and the workforce was not designed to support neurodiverse individuals, and that really sucks. But we need to try our best to succeed in the circumstances in which we're in, which I know, Veronica, you kind of said at the beginning of our chat. And I said, and here's where I guess this comes up. In the speech world, there's this term called code switching. Which is where you change your voice or your communication and the way that you're approaching situations based on the individual or the environment, which Veronica, you also keep saying like it's so important to kind of try to focus on what type of relationship you have with a person rather than like the small details of, oh, I said this in a weird way, are they going to hate me for it? Because I think a lot of clients get stuck in that kind of second guessing or questioning themselves. And so I think really focusing on what type of relationship you have with your coworkers, with your boss, with your manager. And I teach my neurodivergent clients to try to learn to authentically code switch between, hanging out with friends, being around their family, maybe going to church or synagogue or whatever the different situations. And then work being the big focus here is learning how to be a good employee, learning how to meet the expectations of your role, and then not taking the things that are maybe harder or worse for you so personally, especially if it's not part of your job title. And I know, again, I realize how sensitive this topic is, and some people have felt a whole lot of harm and problems stem from not being able to blend in or be a neurotypical and just having a different brain, but I think it's so important, especially with us hopefully all being neurodiverse affirming professionals and in the workforce, is to try our best to advocate and to be our authentic selves, because when we cover up ourselves too much and we start to mask, and I think, Veronica, you and I had a nice conversation about this, and maybe everyone else can think a little bit on it too. I think masking is a term in my mind that's used specifically for the neurodivergent population, more frequently with the autistic population, more frequently with women who feel that they have been constantly taught to suppress their personality and their true authentic selves to please neurotypicals. And I think code switching is different. I think code switching is a term that's used to speak for everyone, and how, with my friends, I might swear, I might be really crude. And then when I'm at work, I say SHIT or sugar, honey, iced tea or something like that. And in a way that is code switching. And so I talk a lot with my clients about kind of figuring out what their work persona is. And that doesn't have to be who they are everywhere else. Like they can be a great friend and be their very authentic selves without any modifications. And hopefully their friend loves and cares for them regardless of who they are. And then at work, there's probably, some demands to kind of modify the way that you might naturally react to something. And hopefully you can code switch or put that mask on, whatever the word is. But I don't like saying, I'm encouraging you to mask. I hate that. So I'm never going to say that. So for me, it's, I'm encouraging you to learn how to effectively code switch depending on the environment and the people that you're around to pave the way for the best success in your life.
I agree. And honestly, while you were talking, something that occurred to me that this person, might have had on in their mind when writing this is the fact that maybe it doesn't feel safe for them to present authentically at work. There are some people who are in toxic work environments
Absolutely.
who feel like they would be targeted and vilified for whatever reason if they showed their authentic self. So in that case, it becomes more of a case of protecting yourself. And in that case, I would say it's probably more important to focus on changing your environment and changing your surroundings so that you are not steeped in that toxicity and you're not constantly in that fight or flight mode. Once you are in an environment that actually gives you stability and support to a certain degree, then I would say that, you can start learning these skills around code switching and everything like that. But keeping in mind that, while neurotypicals will code switch, it's, neurodivergence will have to code switch as well, but our challenges are compounded, because we have all these other challenges that we deal with as well. So don't feel bad if code switching does not come naturally to you. It is something that is trained, and honestly, I consider it more of a survival skill than it is something that has to do with your value as a professional, because this is more just about making sure that you are able to meet your needs and be able to sustain your livelihood and actually enjoy your life and things like that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to align 100% with the expectations at work, but rather find a compromise in between and find an organization and an employer that is willing to do that compromisation with you. So there you go.
Important. Yeah, and you just made me think of bringing up like a checklist again, which maybe I'm repetitive here, but I think it's helpful. Sometimes you don't always have the self-reflective ability to kind of notice what your situation is. And so with my clients, specifically one that is in a work environment that is very not neurodiverse affirming, like she struggles a lot with masking and she hates it, but she feels like she has to, otherwise people are going to disrespect her and give her less tasks, and they'll trust her less, and just all these different awful things. And so one thing that I do with her is every time we start a coaching session is I ask her how she's feeling in certain domains. And like one of those is safety, which I love that you emphasize that sometimes it's about safety and survival. It's not about like, how do I make this good or positive? It's like, I need a job. I need to not be fired so I can pay my bills. So I'm willing to do anything and everything at this boundary, whatever that is. And if masking or acting or whatever is right now what needs to be the thing to happen for you to feel comfortable and safe at work, then that's awful. And I'm very sorry. And you shouldn't feel that way, but that is the reality. And like Veronica said, to me, that's a tell sign that you are not in the right space that's ever going to value you and allow you to learn things like code switching and feeling you can be yourself and really let people in so you can grow as a work professional if you're always just in survival mode. Because that's like what's the chart, Maslow's?
Oh, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
I was going to bring that up, and I was going to talk about, again, sensory regulation. Seems one of my favorite terms, but like that's a basic need that needs to be met before higher level learning can happen. And so if we're talking about like needs, obviously safety and survival come before like preference in your communication and like acceptance and all of that. So it's very important and it's still on there. But yeah, I think that that's why so many people are stuck in trying to feel neurotypical, because their job is just not affirming in any way and they're not trying to be inclusive or accepting.
Absolutely. For sure. Okay, so we have a few more minutes, so let's skip on to the next question here. We might be able to get all of them done. Here's the next question. My manager's feedback to me was that I am unapproachable. I have a really monotone voice and I don't smile enough. Do I really have to pretend to smile all the time and move my voice up and down? It feels inauthentic. And I agree because it probably is inauthentic to who you are. So your feelings are right on point, but let's see what we can do about it. Alex, why don't you take this one first?
So these are my favorite types of clients in the speech world and in the coaching world, like talking about how you want to be portrayed and what you can do, like skills that you can learn and practice. And again, for me, a very affirming approach is extremely important. So anytime I'm offering suggestions, I'm asking, does this feel comfortable? Does this feel like something that you're willing to try? Because I never want to encourage people to mask or to be more uncomfortable than they need to. I want authentic communication. However, if we're talking about code switching or just in general, any skill set, whenever we're at a job, we had to learn skills to be within that job, right? Like we were hired because we learned certain skills. And so if part of your job, and I have a specific example that comes to mind that I'm going to share really quick. I had an older gentleman who was about 55 years old that I was working with and coaching. His wife signed him up for coaching. He is autistic and he's a doctor and he works at like a, what's it called when you do like the really quick, like a primary urgent care. So like he doesn't necessarily see his patients long term, so they can't build up a relationship with him, but first impression is huge. And so he got terrible patient scores, and this is the type of feedback he was receiving from his boss or his higher ups that, hey, people don't like you. Like people are saying that you're cold, you're not empathetic or sympathetic, you're like not engaging in small talk and making them feel heard and validated. And so his wife was like, he needs help. He needs to fix this because we need him to have this job. And so we talked a lot about things that felt maybe a little bit uncomfortable that he was willing to work on, and then maybe some other things that he was not willing to work on. And all of those were okay. So it's a group of skills that you can decide to learn and that you can pursue support for. Or if it feels inauthentic, then finding another environment in which you don't have to do this would also be kind of the option to which I would direct if possible. If you're stuck in it, then probably learning the skills to be good at whatever your role is and to be liked would help you.
Absolutely. And the only other thing that I would mention is if you really if you are in a role that requires you to be like customer facing, or you need to interact with people, and your presentation and your first impressions really do actually impact, whether or not you're successful in the work, then you're going to need to ask yourself, like, if you are going to put in the effort to kind of, code switch, I guess, to reference our previous question, and maintain that presence for the duration of however long you need to work every day, every week, and everything. Is this sustainable for you? Is it something that you would be able to keep up for a year, 2 years, 5 years, or whatever? If it's not, if the answer is no, then chances are that this line of work might not be a sustainable one for you. If you can get away with not being like facing the public all the time, or you don't or like you're working part-time, like in the back of house or something like that, where your facial expressions don't really matter, then maybe you could decide if you could strike a balance, or find other ways to recharge your batteries and make sure that you have time off so that you can recharge. But the most important thing for me when I read this is that, yes, learning how to put on that face might buy you some time, but in the long run, it's probably going to lead to burnout. So you might need to reevaluate what your long-term goals are for your work life and for your career. And that's exactly what I do every day with my clients. So that's just my thoughts on that. Anything else you'd add to that, Alex?
No, just again, affirming what you're saying, and it's giving me lots of thoughts. I like your verbiage. I feel like I think all the same things, but you're really great at putting it into words, because yeah, I talk to my clients a lot about this, and I ask them whether this is a job that they can like see themselves in a year, 2, 3, however many down the line. And if they say no, then I say, listen, I understand having a job is important. So I'm definitely not going to be sitting here suggesting that you just unmask fully, start being yourself, and just whatever consequences come your way. I mean, unless you want to, then go ahead. But I think what you said about potentially having it be a temporary situation, and continuing to do what you need to do in this situation while also seeking out a better fit if you're feeling like your job is not playing to your strengths or is making you here's the verbiage that I'm looking for. It's highlighting your weaknesses. So I think that like we want to avoid jobs that highlight the things that we're like insecure and bad at, unless we've made it a point that we're going to work on those things and like resolve them or get much better at them. So if this person, for example, loves their line of work, and the only component of it that's stressing them out or making them upset is this feedback that they're receiving, then I'd probably be like, it sounds to you that it's worth working on your social skills and your social communication and figuring out how to be more approachable and how to have people respond better to your facial expressions or whatever it is. Whereas if this person's not like in love with their job or very passionate about it and they're feeling this way, I would probably be like, it's not sounding like this is necessarily the best fit. I wonder if there's something else that can highlight your strengths.
Absolutely. I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions, depending on how long we take. So why don't we give this one a go? I hate communicating verbally. I get so overwhelmed and I can never remember anything. How can I get people to communicate with me through chat and email instead? And that's what you've touched on, whoever wrote this question, is actually something that is a very common accommodation that you can actually ask for. But why don't I pass it off to you, Alex? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, so something that I talk a lot about in my work is like comfortable disclosure. And what I mean by that is some sort of like, it can be a pre-written message, it can be a script that you've practiced, it can just be you rambling, whatever you feel comfortable with. But basically, it shares something about your needs. And I think, and this might be controversial, I think it can help to explain why those things are helpful to you. So then people are more receptive to wanting to accommodate you and wanting to help you out, because people tend to be nice. Not everyone. There's definitely awful people out there who are not wanting at all to be understanding of your circumstances and why you're asking for things. But I think most of the time having like a comfortable disclosure, like, hey, I'm Alex, I have ADHD, and for me, it can be really difficult to focus on my work and get through my emails and get through this when I'm sitting next to a loud fan, when there's really bright lights near me, when this and that. Is there an area that I can work in during my like office hour, whatever it is, that I'm asking for? Is there an area where I can be like in peace without any extra noise or excessive lights? And then I have had a mostly positive experience myself asking for things like that, which I have, as well as clients of mine who have approached either HR or, other people within their work environment when they just explain something briefly and then ask for what they would like. And then I was going to say that it can be really helpful if you don't have ideas, because I've had clients, and Veronica, I'm sure you could come up with like a large list of different types of accommodations and modifications. But I've had clients that have asked me like, okay, so I'm autistic and I'm starting this new job. What kind of accommodations should I ask for? And I'm like, oh boy, I don't know. This is like something we could talk about forever and ever, but I don't know if there's certain ones that you're like, I would love to hear from you, which common accommodations or like things that you found helpful that you encourage people to ask for, depending on.
Absolutely. It really depends on the individual, of course, as you know, but some of the more common ones that I've seen are just like the ones that you said, like, getting things in writing, asking for, software that might actually support them, like, a project management system or something that can help them keep everything, organized and stuff like that. What else is there? Definitely one of the most helpful ones is when you get overwhelmed with information and you're not sure how to prioritize your work, having check-ins with your manager to get on the same page as to what is your priority and what needs a more focus and what can go on the back burner and what can, be delayed. And, having that alignment can do wonders for for eliminating those what if the manager disagrees with the way that I do this and stuff like that. So those can all be really helpful. With that said, communicating verbally, I understand how challenging that can be. And one of the things that I would recommend in this case is, if you are in a line of work that requires, verbal communication, just like the question before this, then you need to ask yourself, are you in the right line of work? Because, when you're asking your employer for accommodations, if the accommodations, for your challenge directly conflict with the requirements of your job, then, that could very quickly backfire. So it's really important to make sure that, as Alex said for the previous question, that, your line of work is reasonably aligned to the skills that you have. And, any challenges that you're having, should not interfere with the way, with your ability to do the job and everything. So that's just one tidbit that I would put in there. But that being said, asking people to communicate with you through writing and, having meeting notes sent to you and, having your manager like format and prioritize your notes, that is absolutely an accommodation that I have seen people ask for and I have seen people successfully get. But again, it will depend on the individual and where you are coming from in terms of your employer and stuff like that.
I was also going to say that it could be helpful for you to be the person who accommodates yourself, as long as everyone is aware of this, and telling people that, hey, I'm going to need to grab my notebook really quick, or like, let me get my phone out so I can create a list for myself, because I want to make sure that I don't miss what you're saying. And I think that people really appreciate when they know you're trying, right? Because I think there can be a miscommunication here. If somebody is giving you verbal instructions or trying to support you and you don't receive that, and then you don't get something done, for example, you get overwhelmed and get sidetracked and then you forget things, then you're not doing your job very well. And the person probably doesn't understand why. Like your manager, your boss is like, hello, I told you to do this. Why didn't you do it? So I think, again, disclosure, being like, hey, I remember things so much better if I can write them down. So if it's okay with you, before you continue on with that list, let me go really quick and grab something or grab my phone so I can take some notes and remind myself. I think that's another kind of way to get around the verbal instruction, or, whatever else comes up.
Absolutely. We have the last question I'm going to ask is one that's in the chat here. And we're going to end on this one. So let's give it a shot. The question says, I have a job that I've loved for years, but a new supervisor has come in. I went to HR because of her, and 4 days later, she gave me a PIP, that's a performance improvement plan, based mostly on lies. I'm being told that I'm a problem when it comes to communication, even though I'm the one who's reached out when I get a vibe someone has an issue. I've had to take a leave of absence even. And following the leave of absence, I have medical paperwork seeking accommodations for auditory processing challenges. The request to record meetings was denied, and the request for transcripts for 72 hours was reduced to 12 hours. They have been unwilling to even budge on this, and I have worked in this field since 2007, so it isn't that this is a bad fit for me, but that it's a bad manager, and I don't know how to keep going with a supervisor who've been so abusive. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry you are dealing with this, and I've definitely dealt with nightmare supervisors before, and I'm sure a lot of people in watching this have as well. So I think we really feel your pain. I have thoughts obviously on this, but Alex, why don't you give me your initial thoughts?
Wow. I'm so sorry also. I'm like literally re-skimming it, because there's certain things that stand out to me from like what you shared, Tiffany, and I'm guessing that this is just a little snippet of everything going on. But yeah, I'm so sorry that you're facing all of this. I think something worth looking up, I don't know which place you're located in, but I had a client who was dealing with not maybe the exact same issue, but something similar. And unfortunately, I'm located in Illinois and he is employed in Illinois, and his contract is like fully at will employment. And so he was basically told that they can do whatever they want. And he tried to get a doctor's note. He tried to communicate with coworkers and request help. I mean, I feel so bad. I feel like, and it seems like maybe you've also tried very many things to help yourself and resolve this and to not continue to have to deal with this. And it's just such a shame that you're going through this. But what I was going to say is that they can fire him or they can reprimand him like legally because of us being in Illinois without like any explanation. And like, yeah, based on lies, you know, somebody can completely lie and make up whatever they want because they don't like him, and he can get the bad end of the stick. Is that the idiom? Is that the
Yeah,
saying?
the worst
Anyway,
end of the stick, perhaps.
yeah, hopefully you get what I'm saying. But I overall I'm really sorry. And I think that this brings me back to kind of what Veronica and I think both have mentioned a few times. And I would ask if this job is still serving you. I think it's really, really hard to let go of something that was great at some point. And I actually had that experience. I worked for 4 years in a place that I loved so much. I loved my boss. I loved the company. I put everything I had into it. And when things came to an end in a very bad way, I was very hurt and I was very shocked and I was very thrown off. And similar, it seems like to you being like, how is this happening? You know, like, I can't believe that, you know, there's this one crappy person that came in and is like ruining this whole thing that I've been working so hard at. But I think it's worth recognizing that things can serve a purpose, whether it be a job or a person or actual objects, can serve a purpose in your life and can be great, and then they can change. And so I don't know if the work environment can be like fixed or if this situation can be resolved. I hope that, you know, there's something that can make it better. But I also just want to encourage you to sit and I don't know if you have, but I would, from personal experience, encourage you to kind of sit with the idea of maybe this is all happening for some sort of weird reason. And in front, if you can look forward and seek out, you know, what's right for you down the line, you can find either a new opportunity or something, you know, to the side of what this is, but not exactly this, where you can be appreciated and not have to constantly deal with, I mean, I see the word abuse, which is awful. But hopefully you can find an environment where you're no longer dealing with that. And I see you sent a follow-up. I even have provided evidence of the untruth of the accusations, and I've requested an investigation. It's just harming me so deeply because I've loved this job and this organization. All I can say, I mean, other than what I did say, is that I totally feel for you. I really, really feel for you. I feel like I've been in the same situation where it's just awful. And I'm now in a better place. I guess that's the positive. I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't want to just have a negative tone here. It was really bad for a few months while I was kind of recovering from losing this position that I was so happy at some point, and where I could see myself kind of like way in the future. And I expected that. And then everything crumbled in front of me, and took some time to kind of perspective take and to be like, okay, like, I'm still me. I still have my skills, which I'm sure that you still have your skills that you've been working on since 2007. And so you're clearly very experienced in whatever the specific job is that you do. And so hopefully you can, you know, reflect back, take those skills and find something else where you will be appreciated.
Absolutely. And I know that we're just out of time now, but I do want to take a moment and address this as well, because I have some thoughts. You know, I really sense that you really deeply loved this job, and you really gave a lot to yourself or to the organization over the years. You've been there for many, many years, and you probably made a lot of relationships, a lot of memories there. That being said, I do encourage you to try and ask yourself, you know, because, you know, gone are the days where we stay at companies for a lifetime or for 10 years, 20 years. Like, that was a previous generation. These days, people are jumping jobs all the time. And I'm not saying that you need to be one of those people, but that being said, when a job that you acquired back when you first started has probably evolved over time. You've probably had different versions of this job and different versions of the people around you and your managers and stuff like that over years. So jobs change, and employers change. Employers get bought out and all that kind of stuff. The most important thing is being able to assess whether or not an opportunity is currently serving you. And your choice in this situation seems to be either getting the organization to change the way that they operate and, change their mind about how this manager has been behaving, or you taking it upon yourself to change your environment and, take a risk and start a new chapter, hopefully, in order to preserve your mental health and everything like that. So I'm so sorry you're going through this again, but those are my thoughts, and I hope that you can find a way to navigate this very difficult situation. Just to close off here, I want to thank everybody for being here and asking their questions and, contributing to the conversation. I just want to share a little bit more about Neurodiversity Connection, which is where Alex is the founder of this organization here. Alex, do you want to take a moment and just tell us a little bit about what your organization offers?
Yeah, I would love to. So we're still a little baby. We just got started, and I'm really excited to kind of see what this can grow into, and hopefully all the different supports that we can offer. Something I'm working on right now is creating a kind of happy hour social group for autistic level 1 women. It's going to be virtual, and it's just for an inclusive environment where these women can show up. I already have a handful of women interested, but my goal is to hopefully just create a space where they can show up. We can talk about, what's going on, and kind of use it as like a vent, but vent with purpose session where, everyone can give their input and share in each other's experiences. And, oh, it looks like I got a new subscriber. Thank you so much, whoever you are. I get a notification. So I'm guessing it's one of you guys. I mean, maybe not, but I'm not that popular yet. Oh, Tiffany, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. It's great to have you. But yeah, so that's kind of my goal right now is I work full time still as a speech therapist and as a coach for another practice. And so I hope to grow Neurodiversity Connection and offer a variety of supports specifically in communication and authentic communication for autistic individuals. I do some coaching with ADHD adults as well, but I think I'm very ADHD, and sometimes we just clash and we ramble together when I'm with other just ADHD adults, whereas when we can focus on autism and like how to live with autism and be authentic and help yourself, that's kind of my niche and where I get excited. So yeah, if you guys are interested in following along, I would love to have you. And so you can do what Tiffany just did, go on the website and enter in your email, and I'll be sending my updates as I figure my stuff out.
Amazing. And I just dropped the link into the chat, although it's not showing up as a URL, so you'll just have to copy and paste it, unfortunately. But that's fantastic. And I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about me. I'm obviously, as I said, a career coach for Atypical Careers. That's my business. And I specialize in helping neurodivergent professionals build sustainable work lives and break free of burnout. If you're interested in booking a discovery call, it's just a short call so that we can ask each other questions, get to know one another, and see if we're a good fit for one another. There's no pressure on that. So if you would like to book a discovery call, feel free to send me an email, and I am just going to pop that into the chat right now. And also you can check me out at atypicalcareers.com, which I am popping into the chat right now as well. Some other things, I wanted to announce something really exciting that I've been working on over the last couple of months. Soon I'm going to be launching a new project called A Buzz Academy, and this is a career resource library designed for neurodivergent professionals. Basically, when I first started this business, I realized that almost all the career resources out there were not designed with neurodivergent people in mind, and therefore they didn't really work for us. So I have been working really hard to try and develop my very first signature coaching program. It's called How to Develop a Neurodivergent Friendly Career Strategy. And again, it will help you develop your sustainable work life and break that neurodivergent burnout cycle. So definitely check it out. I am going to pop the link to the mailing list into the chat as well. So if you are interested in getting emails about this, or when we launch in spring, then please feel free to do that. If you haven't joined our Facebook group yet, definitely check it out. We have almost 80,000 members from around the world. That's 80,000 neurodivergent professionals from around the world. And we have really important conversations there. So if you're not already part of that group, be sure to check it out. And that's everything. So thank you so much for sticking around and watching and contributing to this really important conversation. I'm so glad that you are here, and I hope that you found something valuable here as well. Alex, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Just that I really appreciate everyone. It's really nice to be in an environment where you can kind of say truly whatever you're thinking and know that people aren't going to, I mean, as long as you're coming from a nice place, of course, which I am. But it's nice because I feel like I don't always have an environment like that where I can just share my thoughts and be my authentic self and not worry that people are taking it the wrong way or, you know, judging me or something like that. And I very much feel like all of you were here and participating and hopefully, like Veronica said, gaining something from this discussion. But I gained a lot from being able to just, you know, authentically talk through some of the stuff that we did, and it gave me some additional perspective. I like to say I always learn from the people that I get to work with and that I meet through this career, which is really, really cool. It's never a boring day to be a speech therapist or a coach.
Absolutely. And you're doing such important work, and I'm so grateful for your input today in this discussion. So please feel free to stay in touch. Thank you so much for being part of this, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.